In the name of the one who gives us life, heals our hearts, and leads us to the light. If you were with us last week, you might remember David's sermon about how Jesus began his public ministry in the Gospel of John by calling together his first disciples with the words, "Come and see." Today, we get Mark's version of the story, and here Jesus says, "Follow me." Did you notice the distinction? In John, the emphasis is on seeing and recognizing, whereas in Mark, it's on moving. What seems to matter most in Mark's gospel is not so much whether the disciples recognize Jesus for who he is, but whether they join him along the way. Whether they get up, leave what they have behind, and get moving into the new life Jesus offers. Movement and change are, of course, facts of life. And we've sure seen some change this past year. Unprecedented change, unimaginable change. Yet even in pre-COVID times, we know that 1 in 5 people make a geographical move every year. And if we're not moving locations, we're moving from one job to the next or thinking about it. Some of us are making a move into or out of a relationship. Those of you who are parents are helping your children move through childhood and adolescence onto college and into the workplace. Others of us are moving our parents through retirement or facing our own retirement. As a congregation, we have made a number of moves this past year, from worshiping every Sunday here in the church to watching services from our homes on YouTube. When the weather was warmer, we moved the sanctuary outside, breaking bread and baptizing babies with masks on, standing 6 feet apart. Coffee hour moved from the parish hall to the Zoom screen, along with meetings and church programs. We even moved our food pantry collection from the boxes here in the chancel to the back of David's SUV, parked on 24th and Broad. These moves, though they sound commendable in hindsight, were filled with uncertainty. They created anxiety. Who knew how they'd turn out? But we made them. We took the leap of faith and we kept moving. That's how it is with a life of faith. It's a journey. If you read the Bible, you don't get an account of people sitting around figuring out what to believe. You get people on the move. Abraham and Sarah, Moses, all hear God's call and with radical trust, pick up and move. Today, we hear God tell Jonah to get up and go. And then in our gospel reading, God gets people moving once again when a carpenter from Nazareth walks up to a group of fishermen mending their nets and says, "Follow me." Now, it is true that standing still and the need for it is also an act of faith, as our psalm for today suggests. For God my soul in silence waits. We all need silence and stillness to hear the voice of God, which for many, me included, can be barely a whisper. But once we are stirred by that still, small voice, faithfulness is all about response, about movement, getting up and going. In the Gospel of Mark, there is a particular eagerness and urgency about this movement. Immediately, Mark writes, the first two disciples leave their nets. Immediately, Jesus calls two more. The Greek word for immediately is used at least 40 times in Mark's gospel. And yet, this great sense of exuberance is often tempered by an experience of anxiety or fear or reluctance. The same disciples who drop their nets to follow Jesus are also the ones who are terrified in the stormy seas and who abandon Jesus as he moves toward the cross. One of the wisest books that I've found to describe this exhilarating yet frightening prospect of leaving the old to follow the new was written not by some serious academic, but by none other than Dr. Seuss in his book, Oh, the Places You'll Go. It begins by saying, congratulations, today's your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know. And you are the guy who will decide where to go. However, there are risks and hazards in moving, as our beloved Dr. Seuss recognizes also. Elsewhere in his short book, he warns us that the going will not always be smooth or easy. He says, I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true that the bang-ups and hang-ups will happen to you. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you stay out? Do you dare go in? Our future, it seems, hinges on our response to that question. Do we turn away from or move toward the promise of new life, scary as that may be? Are we willing to change direction, orientation, not only with our bodies, but in our hearts and in our minds? Think about what happens in today's gospel. Jesus walks beside the Sea of Galilee and sees two men, Simon and Andrew, casting their nets. He says to them, "Follow me." And that's what they do. They lay down their nets and follow. He sees two more, James and John, mending their gear with their father, sitting in their fishing boat. And Jesus says, "Follow me." and that's what they do. We wish there was more to it than that. We wish that we could know more about these men and their lives and what made them so ready to move, so willing to accept the risks and the insecurities that they would face by walking away from families, jobs, and traditions into an unknown future. We wish that we could know that they knew Jesus had reason for confidence in them, knew where he was leading them. But we don't know that. All we get is invitation and response. Invitation and response. Isn't that the same pattern we follow when we take on the journey that God offers each one of us? If I have learned anything in my years of ministry, it's that living life faithfully begins with an invitation, a summons to follow, and continues on a path that leads us always more deeply into the heart of God. A path characterized by living for others and by giving our resources and our skills, our passion and love and life itself for the purposes of God. In this past year at St. John's, we've been able to follow that path with adaptability, resourcefulness, and resilience. And while this journey we share will always mean change, it won't necessarily mean a change in location or vocation or relationships. When Jesus called Andrew and Simon to be fishers of people, they remained fishermen. Only the bait and the catch were different. Sometimes the greatest moves we make are not physical or even relational, but are moves of the heart, changes in orientation, in our attitudes, or in our attachments. Jesus called his disciples to get up from what they were doing and to follow him. He promised them new life. He said they would actually find their lives by giving up an old way of living or seeing or thinking. In letting go, there was something immeasurable to gain. The promise of healing, surprise, adventure, challenge, and through it all, new life, real life. As we move through our annual meeting today and into the year that lies ahead, I invite you to consider what it means for you, for me, for us to follow Jesus on the way. And keep in mind what Dr. Seuss also said. Out there, things can happen, and frequently do, to people as brainy and footsy as you. And when things start to happen, don't worry, don't stew. Just go right along. You'll start happening too. Oh, the places you'll go. Amen.